Ian Richardson, Simon Shepherd, Clive Owen, Mary Nightingale, Amelia Fox, Gemma Redgrave, Charles Dance, Roger Cook, Dame Diana Rigg, Alistair Stewart, Faye Dunham, Saskia Wickham, Louise Lombard, Michael Jaston, Kevin Waitley, Adrian Lucas, Joanna Lumley, Gary Mavers, Nigel Havers, Rick Mayle as Toad, Lisa Cotter, Michael Gambler as Badger, Nicholas Farrell, Alan Bennett as Mole, Donald Sinding, Michael Kitchen, David Calder, Sheila Hancock, Sir Derek Jacobi, Sean Bean, and me, from Carlton, on Carlton.
This is Carlton. It's exactly 10 o'clock.
Good evening. The votes are cast. The polling stations are closed. Our prediction, based on the Mori exit poll for ITV, is that Labour have clearly won this election with what appears to be a massive majority. In the crucial hours ahead, we'll see just how accurate that forecast is. We'll report on the results flooding in from around the country, and we'll find out who are the winners and the losers. Here in the hub of ITV's election studio, we're poised to share with you the drama ahead. For tonight is decision night for the nation in election 97. Welcome to Election 97, the results program on ITV. We'll be here live throughout the night, and we'll be back again tomorrow to bring you all the election news as it happens. And now to our exit poll, with the reminder that these polls can at best provide a rough estimate of how the country has voted, and they have been wrong in the past. But our prediction, based on the Mori exit poll, is that Labour will win this election with a huge majority of 159 seats. That figure is in line with the campaign polls. It's based on a Mori poll carried out for us today with 15,000 voters outside polling stations in 100 marginal constituencies. Part of the drama of election night is to see how close our forecast is to the actual result. But unless there is a quite remarkable upset, what does now seem certain is that Labour will form the next government. And the scale of this victory would mean that the people who tonight are holding the great offices of state, many of them would not only be out of power, but some of them without a seat. So stay with us to witness what is undoubtedly one of the great moments in British post-war politics. For, unless the exit poll is wildly out, tonight represents a truly seismic shift in the public opinion of the nation. Our aim is to bring you the fastest, the clearest, and the friendliest election night service. Our ITV election studio here is in the heart of ITN's headquarters. With me, a team that has an enormous amount of experience covering elections. Just over there, Alistair Stewart, with his high-tech graphics, is going to make sense of the statistics which will soon be flowing his way. At the other end of the studio is Sue Lawley with a panel of voters drawn from the ITV 500. And behind me in our results area are election computers, their programmers and operators, and our results update staff. And in the thick of that, a formidable trio of election analysts. Going from left to right on your screen, Professor Colin Rallings, Dr. David Butler, a veteran of programs like this, and ITN's political analyst, David Cowling. And next to me here, Michael Brunson, ITN's political editor, who will be looking at the big picture as it unfolds. Mike, if this exit poll is correct, it really is the most astonishing turnaround.
It is going to be, if it is correct, one of those very, very important moments when British political history takes a decisive turn, a really decisive turn. It would mean that it would be a Labour government which effectively would have its best ever mandate, better, for example, than 66, better perhaps even than 1945. And importantly, it means legislation will pass through the House of Commons which will change Britain devolution, for example, Scotland, and perhaps looking forward, abolition of the House of Lords.
And for the Tories,
An absolute disaster, and you can be certain that the tremors within the Tory party, the shakeout of all of this means will begin tomorrow morning.
we will explore all this on the assumption, of course, that that exit poll is right. During the night, we'll also be taking you out of this studio to every part of the nation, to the heart of the election story. We've got reporters and live cameras right across the country. There are more than 40 locations, from Ross, Skye and Inverness in the northwest of Scotland, right down to St Ives in Cornwall. And they're all poised to bring you the key declarations and the big-name political interviews. The counting is about to get underway. This, for example, is Edinburgh, where Malcolm Rifkin, the Foreign Secretary, faces a serious challenge from Labour. And here is the picture in Birmingham, home to some of those crucial marginal constituencies in the West Midlands. And this is Wandsworth and Putney in London, where the former Home Secretary David Mellor could be in real trouble. There is a huge amount to look out for tonight, and as we've said, a host of famous political names that could go down in the next few hours. Not only Malcolm Rifkin, but fellow cabinet ministers like Michael Forsyth and Ian Lang. And there'll be the outcome of those subplots in the election, such as the battle between Neil Hamilton and Martin Bell at Tatton. So, a huge night of drama in store. But time now for a brief roundup of today's news and weather. Here's Juliet Somerville. Juliet Somerville.
Thank you, Jonathan. The main party leaders were all up and out early in their constituencies today, casting their own votes and thanking supporters. They were enjoying the sunshine too, and that was expected to produce a high turnout of voters. But in fact, it was low in many areas. Mark Webster was with Tony Blair in Sedgefield in the northeast of England, and Caroline Kerr with Paddy Ashdown in Yeovil in the southwest. But our first report is by Tom Bradby, who was with the Prime Minister in Huntingdon.
Mr Major was out early this morning, voting under the watchful eye of the police. So far, Election Day has passed off peacefully, despite fears of disruption by the IRA. For the rest of this sunny day, Mr Major was touring his constituency, meeting party workers.
Members of my constituency with only one ear all over the place. Yes, well, at least it goes in one ear and doesn't come out the other.
He met Matilda, who is 102.
Matilda has voted for as long as women can vote. And she's voted for us. Cheers, everybody. Hello, Tom. Hello. How are you today? I'm in very good shape, Tom.
Is the weather a good omen?
I think it's a very good omen for democracy when you've got weather like this on polling day and what looks like a high turnout.
If Mr Major eventually goes on to win tonight, it will be one of the most remarkable political turnarounds. If he loses, his advisers acknowledge the war of succession could begin immediately. But for the moment, the Majors are at home, waiting. Tom Bradby, ITN, in Huntingdon.
Determined to strike a cautious note right to the end, Tony Blair and his family strolled a few hundred yards to the polling station this morning. Leaving nothing to chance, Labour said it was pleased with its campaign, and after weeks on the road, Mr Blair said he was feeling fine. Signs already that winning would change the family's life dramatically. But according to Labour, personal attacks on Mr Blair's integrity and commitment during the campaign had backfired. An early suggestion that he was cracking up was dismissed as patent nonsense. Over at Trimdon Labour Club, in the heart of the Sedgefield constituency, was an enormous sense of pride in Mr Blair's achievements. And a confidence that he's about to become the youngest Prime Minister this century. The Blairs and their 3 children will spend this evening here at their family home in Sedgefield, watching the results coming in on the television. Despite the fact that Labour's private polling shows they have done reasonably well, the official line from Mr Blair is, as it always has been during this campaign, that he's taking nothing for granted. However, within the Blair camp, there is a growing sense of excitement that this really could be Mr Blair's and Labour's night. Mark Webster, ITN, Sedgefield.
It was a beautiful morning in Somerset as Mr Ashdown and his wife took a relaxed stroll to their local polling station. Arriving just after 9, they were among the first to vote in their Yeovil constituency. The Liberal Democrat leader has been predicting that this election will mark a breakthrough for his party. By lunchtime, he thought the turnout encouragingly high.
Extraordinary surprise. I don't think we are going to get a low turnout.
No.
From what I can see, we're getting terrific turnout.
I think people have decided this is it. They've had enough.
Yeah.
They're going out to vote them out.
Education has been a constant theme for Mr Ashdown during this election campaign. This afternoon found him once again visiting a local sixth form college. He'd come to address a group of first-time voters, to do a little last-minute canvassing as he answered their questions about his party's policies. This evening, he and his wife went out for a private dinner with family friends, a moment of brief relaxation after a campaign in which he's travelled more than 17,000 miles. After dinner, Mr Ashdown will watch the first results here at home, before setting off for the declaration of his own result in Yeovil. But he'll be more concerned tonight about the fate of fellow Liberal Democrat candidates at key seats across the country. Caroline Kerr, ITN, Yeovil.
The Loyalist prisoners' protest at the Maze prison in Northern Ireland was called off tonight after what their political representatives claimed were concessions by the authorities. The prison service confirmed that for a trial period, the prisoners will be counted in dining halls, not while they're locked in their cells. Our Ireland correspondent John Irvine reports.
There was a series of bomb alerts across Belfast today. In places only the Army bomb squad could get through the traffic snarl-ups. The alerts may have been the work of loyalists demonstrating their support for prisoners in the Maze. A series of controlled explosions were carried out, but all the alerts turned out to be hoaxes. At the prison itself today, there was a respite in the rooftop protest as negotiations continued. Loyalist politicians were the intermediaries. After putting a government offer to the prisoners this evening, they announced that agreement had been reached.
The main issue being that of lockup has been redressed. The government has changed its position and recognised the loyalist concerns over this, and I'm very glad that they have done so.
The rooftop protest began on Tuesday when loyalists resisted a new regime which required that they be locked in their cells twice a day for head counts. The counts will be carried out, but there will be no cell lockups. The authorities will not now implement new security measures in the way they had intended. John Irvine, ITN, the Maze Prison.
The proposed talks between President Mobutu of Zaire and the rebel leader Laurent Kabila are still apparently on, though it looks tonight as if they won't now happen before Saturday. They'll be held on a South African ship with President Mandela mediating. Thousands of Rwandan Hutu refugees, many in a pitiful state, have been emerging from the Zairean forest and heading for camps south of Kisangani. Aid workers there said they couldn't keep up with the flood. 2 women died today after being pulled unconscious from the sea in South Wales. The women in their 20s had been sunbathing on rocks at Mumbles near Swansea. Coast Guards and police think they tried to swim to safety after they were cut off by the incoming tide. The first hosepipe ban of the summer came into force today. It's in Guernsey, but unless the heavens open, similar bans are expected in many other areas soon. In England and Wales, the first 4 months of this year have been the driest for 68 years. John Taylor reports.
Preparing for the holiday trade, but this is his last chance. Faced with the driest 2 years for centuries, Guernsey's preemptive hosepipe ban will protect limited supplies. It's a decision that's likely to be repeated across the British mainland. The River Ouse in Sussex, at its lowest level since records began. Today's rainfall charts for England and Wales bear out fears for the summer. There should have been 88 millimetres of rain in January. We got just 15. February redressed the balance, but March was dry, with just 24 millimetres instead of the expected 72. Last month had less than half the normal rainfall, just 25 millimetres. Mid-Kent Water are now using a new computer system to target supplies on areas of greatest need, whilst fibre optic cameras monitor underground storage that's well below capacity.
It allows us to see the condition of that borehole so that we can repair it to ensure that it's in tip-top condition in order to meet peak demands.
Amongst the few beneficiaries of changing climate are English vineyards. For some, at least, it may be a vintage summer. John Taylor, ITN.
A former judge who was found to be nearly 5 times over the limit following a road accident in the Cotswolds was jailed today for 5 months. John Reader conducted the inquiries into the Herald of Free Enterprise disaster and the Penlee lifeboat tragedy. He admitted drink driving. And Rick Parfitt from the rock band Status Quo is recovering in hospital in London after an emergency quadruple heart bypass operation. Doctors expect Parfitt, who's 48 and has a reputation for hard living, to make a full recovery, though all Status Quo's concerts before August have been cancelled. Well, that's the news so far this evening. I'm off right now to report through the night from the Labour Party's campaign headquarters in London. We'll be returning to Jonathan Dimbleby in the election studio shortly, but first, the weather.
Hello, good evening. Well, whatever your political allegiances, there's a big change afoot on the weather front. As for today, it's settled into the warmest day of the year so far, soaring temperatures into the mid-20s in the heart of England, low 20s elsewhere, but certainly cooler near the coasts. Our Met Office wind flow chart here highlights the reason why. High pressure firmly in charge, anchored over the country. We're on the threshold of a bank holiday weekend, of course, so surprise, surprise, it's a case of low pressure taking over, bringing some rain to many of us, coupled with much colder northeasterly winds, bringing the possibility of some snow on some northern hills. So quite a shock to the system. We'll keep you posted. No such drama tonight, at least not on the weather front. Dry, fine, clear skies, thicker cloud in the very far north with some drizzly rain. So it's a grey start here tomorrow morning up in the very far north. Elsewhere, fine and warm, the brightest sunshine in the south as well as the east. During the course of the day, we've that cloud and rain sinking southwards into mainland Scotland, brighter weather behind. Temperatures here at 12 to 14. Elsewhere, every bit as warm as today, cooler on the coasts. Good night.
Power gen, generating electricity whatever the weather.
Welcome back to Election 97 on ITV. Over the next hour, we'll give you the full details of our exit poll. We'll be gearing up for those counts that are competing to declare early. We'll be having the first of our big-name political interviews, and we'll be hearing from our panel of voters. Have no doubt, this promises to be a quite extraordinary evening. For the first time in 18 years, if our exit poll is right, we're about to have a Labour Prime Minister and a Labour Cabinet, and indeed it would be a Labour government which would lead the country into the next century. First, the details of the exit poll. Let me repeat my note of caution. These predictions have been wrong before, so they're only an indicator. Clearly, we've got to wait for the real results to know the real story. But our prediction, based on today's Mori exit poll, is that Labour will win with a massive majority of 159 seats. As the actual results come in, we'll amend that figure accordingly, so do expect the forecast figure to go up and down over the next couple of hours. Mike, what do you make of the exit poll?
Well, the astonishing thing is that it is broadly in line with the sort of polling ranges that the national polls have been giving us right the way through the campaign. They've basically been in that kind of area. The other extraordinary thing, of course, is that Conservative politicians have throughout the campaign insisted that the polls are absolutely 100% wrong. They say they bear no relation to what they found out there. But it looks as though the pattern that was emerging during the campaign has indeed come to fruition tonight.
And Professor Colin Rallings in our analysts area, what are you making of it?
Well, Mike Brunson's quite right. It is in line with the campaign polls. A number of people thought it perhaps couldn't quite happen like this, but it looks as if, Jonathan, it really might well have done. And if it has, Labour will have its largest majority ever. The Conservatives will have their lowest share of the vote since at least 1859, and there could be the largest third-party force in Parliament since 1923. Historic night indeed.
Colin, thank you. An extraordinary result, if that's how it turns out to be. Our focus, of course, is on who gets into Downing Street. But there is also another battle going on tonight. That's the one to see which constituency can declare first. It's now a ritual part of the drama of election night, and some local officials take it very seriously indeed. Let's hear from ITN reporters covering the race to be first.
This is Sunderland, where the constituency of Sunderland South was the first to declare last time. They enjoyed that brief moment of fame so much they're determined to repeat it this time. Below me here, 140 bank clerks are counting furiously. It's reckoned that they can count faster than anyone else. A fleet of 65 vans whisked the ballot boxes here in a matter of minutes. And wait for this, before they even printed the ballot papers, they tested various thicknesses of paper to see which could be counted the fastest. That's how seriously they're taking this. They're determined not just to be fastest tonight, but the fastest ever, beating a record set in Billericay back in 1959 of 57 minutes. If they're to do that, you will be back here with me for the first real result of this election in, what, a little over half an hour. This is James Mates at the election count in Sunderland for election 97.
Here in Wrexham, the first ballot boxes arrive within 5 minutes of the polls closing, and as you can see behind me, they are busily counting away. Most of them should be here fairly shortly. This is a small constituency, just 42 polling stations as opposed to 62 last time because of boundary changes, and that's one reason why they think they could be the first to declare in this historic general election. Its Labour candidate, Dr. John Marwick, is confident that he will regain his seat again with an increased majority. We should find out how the other 5 candidates have fared and Dr. John Marwick within an hour. This is Anya Sitharam at the Wrexham count for election 97.
There is something of the fighting spirit here at Hamilton South in Scotland tonight to be the first declaration. In fact, I was talking to the returning officer, Alistair McNish. He's walking around down there at the moment. Now, he's been going down, rallying the troops, saying, come on, we've got to be first. We've got to beat the English. So perhaps he has something of the Braveheart warrior spirit. However, we're not expecting any political bloodshed here tonight. This is one of Labour's safest seats. It's the constituency of George Robertson, the shadow Scottish secretary, and he has a majority of just under 20,000. What we're waiting to see is whether the Tories will be beaten into 4th place and how much the Scottish National Party vote will erode the Labour Party vote. We shall find out probably about 11:15. This is Adrian Britton at the Hamilton South count for election 97.
And I promise you, whichever is first, we'll be there for the result. We are determined tonight not to bury you under a mountain of statistics, yet of course the figures matter, and that's where Alistair Stewart comes in. His job is to bring clarity where confusion might otherwise reign. Over the next hour or so, I'll be handing over to him at various times so that he can take us through his graphics. Alistair.
Thanks, Jonathan. Tonight, with the miracle of the microchip and some backroom wizardry, we can recreate the famous green benches of the House of Commons right here in the studio. And there you are. Behind me, the Speaker's chair. We've taken out the dispatch boxes so that I can walk up and down. Here on my right are the government benches, and on the left, the opposition benches. Now, with a click of my fingers, I can create a chamber full of electronic MPs. There they are. Now, what's crucial, of course, is which parties these 659 MPs will belong to. To be sure, we're going to have to wait some time, but we forecast that Labour is indeed going to be on these government benches with no fewer than 409 seats. The Conservatives are going to have to make the painful journey across here to the opposition benches and occupy just 177 seats. The Liberal Democrats will still be in their normal place just there, but more than doubling their holding to 45 seats. The others, including the Scottish National Party, Plaid Cymru, and the seats in Northern Ireland will be there with 28 seats. Now, there are also some other new features about this new House of Commons. It's not just the political lineup that's changing. We estimate that the new House will have a record number of women MPs, more than 100. Now, remember, it takes 330 seats to win, and so that would give Labour an overall majority of 159. That, of course, if our forecast is right. Jonathan.
Of course. Thanks, Alistair. Joining me now are the campaign managers of the 3 main parties. Labour's Peter Mandelson, the Conservative chairman, Dr. Brian Mulwiney, and for the Liberal Democrats, Lord Home. Peter Mandelson, first of all, what's your immediate reaction to this exit poll, which gives you unbelievable scale of victory?
Well, Jonathan, you won't be surprised that I am my usual cautious self. I'm sure that these exit polls are exaggerated, but it does look like a good win, and obviously I'm very pleased and very excited for the country.
Brian Mulwiney, you've got a smile just about on your face. What does that smile tell us? Nothing?
The British people have decided, Jonathan. The polls have closed. There is a new parliament. There is a new government. We simply have to be patient for a little while to find out exactly what they've decided. I'm a patient man.
Michael Heseltine's just said it doesn't look good, but it didn't look good at the last election at this time.
Well, I'm not going to speculate because my speculation isn't worth anything anymore. The decision's already been taken. We just have to wait to find out what it is, and I'm happy to wait for a little while longer.
Hold there for a moment, if you would. But Lord Home now. Lord Home, the exit poll is suggesting that the Liberal Democrats might emerge with over 40 seats in the next Parliament. Is that what your own polling might indicate, that your targeting has worked as effectively as that?
It looks as though it has worked. We're extremely optimistic about a very good night, but like Brian Mulwiney, I think we should wait till the voters decide. But all the omens are good, and we're extremely positive, and it looks as though it'll be a Labour victory, the lowest Conservative vote this century, or maybe even longer, and a very good result from Liberal Democrats.
Lord Holmes, stay there for a second. I'm going back to Peter Mandelson, if I can. Peter, the exit polls suggest, which is in 100 marginals, the exit polls suggest that the turnout is the lowest that there's been since the war, a turnout possibly of under 70, which tells us maybe that the Tories have stayed at home because they're not too keen on the Tories, but they're also not exactly enthusiastic about Labour.
Well, I don't think there's any evidence for that at all, Jonathan. I mean, there may be a little bit of battle fatigue having crept in. This has, after all, been a very, very long campaign, and all the polls have suggested a Labour win. And so people were taking it for granted, perhaps, that, you know, Labour was going to get there and Tony Blair was going to be in number 10. I don't know. All I know is from my own experience, and certainly from my own constituency here, where we've actually had a large Conservative vote in the past, that very, very many people were coming straight across from Conservative to Labour because we are new Labour. We have changed. We are now a new party. People like that. They've given approval and the thumbs up, and I think you'll see that borne out by the result.
I hope we can talk to you again later on, Peter. So. Brian Mulwiney, have you had exhausted people, and that's why you haven't been able to get them out? They've just said, no, we know that the Tories can't do it?
I'm sorry, John, could you repeat that? I didn't hear the first half of the question.
I'll shout it at you all the way between the two of us. Do you think that people stayed at home, that your people stayed at home?
Frankly, I think until we actually have the figures, it's pointless to speculate. There will, of course, be time and no doubt the inclination to want to review the last weeks and the last months and to analyse the figures. But I think we really ought to wait until we have the hard figures rather than speculative figures.
Dr. Mulwiney, hope to talk to you again later on. Thanks very much. And briefly, just Lord Home, if I could, there could be the extraordinary paradox that your seats go up, but your share of the vote goes down.
There's not the slightest evidence of that. Your exit poll and the other side show us with 18% of the vote, which is exactly the same share we got last time. We might even improve on that, but we shall certainly do a lot better in seats.
We look forward, I hope, to talking to you later on. Lord Home, thanks very much for joining us. Thank you all three gentlemen for joining us. Now, most of the results will be announced overnight, although some, including Northern Ireland seats, will declare tomorrow. We'll also have to wait until tomorrow to find out about the local election results. As for tonight, as we've said, the real excitement takes place out in the constituencies. To find out exactly what happens there, let's take a look behind the scenes at one of the counting centres. Robert Hall is at Southampton.
Jonathan, this is Southampton Civic Centre, where in fact they're carrying out two counts this evening, those for Southampton Test and Southampton Itchen. That long campaign may have ended, but at civic centres and sports centres throughout the country, the election is far from over. The two constituencies here have more than 100 polling stations. For the staff who reported here for duty this evening, you can see them gathering in the corridors. The casting of a vote is just the beginning of a very long night.
Les Hines, 138 Milton Avenue.
45,000 polling stations opened their doors this morning. By the time those doors close tonight, an estimated 35 million people across Britain will have cast their vote. And this is where the action is focused in Southampton. 180 people here, a lot of them selected from bank staff, presumably because they're nimble with the fingers. I'm being allowed to interrupt Kay Free. Kay, can I call you over for a second? I know you're terribly, terribly busy. It's your third count. Is it genuinely exciting? Do you feel a sense of excitement?
It is now, yes. We're well underway and really counting away there at the moment.
It must be a nightmare that you get something wrong, you forget what you're doing.
Well, I think the worst part is the counting agents overlooking your shoulder all the time, and they certainly pick you up on any mistakes that you make.
Is it routine? You've done it before. Is each one different?
Each one's different, yes, absolutely. This one is more exciting. It's a parliamentary election, which I've not been involved with before, and you get a feel as time goes on and certainly later on in the stages, that you know, where the parties are, as you're counting, you can see where the crosses are and you get a feel for what's going on.
Well, I can see them waiting for you to get back now, so I'll let you go back and sit down, but I will have a quick word with Malcolm Dumper. Malcolm, the returning officer here, you've masterminded all this. What's your nightmare?
Well, my nightmare, if I'm still here in 12 hours' time, which sincerely hope we won't be, but it's going very well. We started early, we're cracking on, boxes are in. We would think within the next 20 minutes all the boxes will be in, and we'll be well underway.
Now, how strict? People wonder how strict security is, how strict you have to be about who can come close, who can see what.
Well, yes, I mean, as long as the candidates feel that they've got sufficient coverage of the voting process and they can scrutinise every particular part of the process, then really their job is to oversee that part, and we've given them every facility tonight.
Well, it all looks jolly smooth, Malcolm. Thanks very much, and the best of luck. So how do we get the results to you? Well, at every count across the country, we have a journalist waiting for that moment that the result is announced. If we look across the hall, you can see Dave Holt there. He's our freelance journalist here in Southampton. He and his colleagues will be ringing that result through as quickly as they can to ITN headquarters. Jonathan.
Thanks, Robert. And after the result has been entered into our computer network, it will flash along the lower part of your screen, as you can see down there. It will update our graphics like the large election scoreboard above me. The details on these graphics will constantly change as those results come in. It will adjust the prediction system being worked on in our results area. The banks of computers there have been programmed to take instant account of every result phoned in. When the full result is phoned in, it will also appear on our ITN's election website. That's www.itnelection.co.uk. During the night, you will also be able to see the full result on ITV's teletext, page 500. And I will be able to call up any of the full results on my very own election computer here. So, one way or another, you can't help know but what's going on. Throughout the campaign, ITN's correspondents have followed the three party leaders as they've crisscrossed the country. And, as we saw on the news earlier, they're still with them tonight. Mark Webster is at Sedgefield with Tony Blair, Tom Bradby is at Huntingdon with John Major, and Caroline Kerr is in Yeovil with Paddy Ashdown. Mark, first of all, are you getting any feedback on that exit poll?
Yes, I have just talked to one of Miss Blair's most senior aides, and he reflected the kind of caution you heard from Peter Mandelson. He was saying Labour would be amazed if it actually turned out they had as big a majority as we're predicting. Nonetheless, he did go as far as to say that their turnout has been extremely good. That's by far and away their most positive assessment today, when they've exercised caution until now.
And have you got any, do you know what's going to happen, the Sedgefield timetable and Tony Blair's timetable?
Yes, I do indeed. Well, in the meantime, they will actually be at their house, which is in the constituency, which I hope you can see there. It's an old colliery manager's house. At about midnight, they're going to come here to the count, and we're expecting the result here for about 1:30-ish. After that, what he wants to do is, and it's going to be the highlight of his evening, he wants to go back to the Trimdon Labour Club, which he says is his political heartland, and he's going to go there and address all the people who so faithfully supported him throughout this campaign and in previous ones.
Mark, we'll be with you, and we'll be there, I think, later on. Tom Bradby in Huntingdon now. What's the feeling there about the exit poll, if you've got any of it?
Mr. Major's camp said earlier that they weren't going to comment on the exit polls, and indeed they haven't done so yet. But I did speak to one of Mr. Major's closest advisors earlier, been with him for a long time, knows him very well. She said her instinct was that they would lose their overall majority, but still be the largest party. Now, having said that, she accepted an awful lot of evidence was pointing a different way, and she said for the first time in many, many elections, she really was very confused and didn't know whether to trust her instincts.
It's quite intriguing that you've got someone close to the Prime Minister even acknowledging that at this stage in the evening. Anyway, what are his plans?
He's at home at the moment. I hope you can see the gate of his house there. Expected to leave sometime after 12. We're not sure exactly when. Hard to know what he's doing, of course, but apparently last time he had dinner, went upstairs and had a bath and listened to the results in the studies and was absolutely jubilant after midnight and shouted, "We've got it, we've got it," or somebody in the study did. Maybe a very different atmosphere tonight.
Tom will be back there whenever he does move. In Yeovil, Caroline Kerr. Caroline, they have picked up on the exit poll?
They're also being very cautious, but they say that the exit poll is encouraging. If it's correct, there's no doubt about it, it would be a tremendous result for the Liberal Democrats. In the 4 weeks that I've been travelling around with Mr. Ashdown and his entourage, there's been no point at which any of the senior aides have predicted as many as 45 seats. They've been talking about a breakthrough. I think that that kind of result would justify the claim.
And when are you expecting Paddy Ashdown to turn up, do you know, at the count? We know he's out to dinner and then going back to Vane Cottage. When's he going to join you, do you know?
He's back home now, and he's due to leave his home at about 12:30 when he'll come here for the declaration. then he's on to the local Liberal club to thank the party workers, and then it's off to London, to a party being hosted by the Liberal Democrats in central London.
Thanks very much, all of you. Now, every election programme has its jargon and its buzzwords, not too many of them, but we've already talked of our exit poll. You'll hear a lot about swing, and there's a further complication tonight. Many constituencies have had their boundaries redrawn since the last election. Because of these boundary changes, some safe seats have become marginal, and some marginal seats have become safe. Here's a quick roundup of those key buzzwords and phrases. First, boundary changes. Nearly 7 million people have sold their homes since the last election, and that movement of people, of voters, has changed the country's profile. Some towns have grown, some shrunk, and as Britain moves, so its political landscape needs to move as well.
It's gonna have to be a different man. Time may change me, but I can't trace time.
Since the last election, most constituencies have been altered to follow the population. Their boundaries have changed. The result, inevitably, is extra uncertainty tonight. But a group of academics has been crunching the statistics to work out how these seats would have gone if the new boundaries had been in place for the 1992 election. These they call notional results. Next, the exit poll. Outside polling stations in 100 marginal seats, Mori canvassers have been asking many of you to vote again. The reason? The Mori exit poll. It gives us the earliest indication of how the election is likely to have gone in key marginal seats and provides the raw data for our election prediction. Our computer analysts are working right now on the ITN election prediction, a pointer to the makeup of the new House of Commons. At the moment, this prediction is based only on the Mori exit poll, but as the real results come in, they of course will shape the forecast. And our election prediction, therefore, will change as the evening progresses, until it's based exclusively on those real results. And finally, swing.
It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. Do-ah, 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 do-ah. It don't mean
The swingometer is a famous feature of election nights since the early days of television. But what exactly is swing?
makes a difference if it's sweet or high.
If Labour are to win this election, they need voters to switch to them from the Tories. The size of that switch is called the swing. Tonight, we'll be talking about the swing in those marginal constituencies that decide the election and the swing across the country as a whole. If a little more than 4 in every 100 people who voted Conservative last time switched to Labour today, the door of number 10 will open to Tony Blair. That swing, 4.3%, is enough to give Labour an overall majority. But of course, the swing indicated by our exit poll prediction is vastly higher than that figure tonight. So let's go to Alistair to introduce his swingometer.
Thanks, Jonathan. As we say, swing measures how votes are shifting from one party to another, and the bigger the percentage swing to Labour, clearly the better it is for Mr. Blair. So now let's bring in our giant swingometer and explain it to you. Here along the top is the swing to Labour, 2, 4, 6, 8% perhaps. On the other side, could happen, we could all be completely wrong, the swing to the Conservative Party, 2, 4, and so on and so forth. Remember, this is the swing in the key marginal constituencies. And down here along at the bottom is the majority the parties will get for any given swing. So let's say, for example, that there's a swing of 2% to Labour. The result would be a hung parliament. If the swing is just over 4.3% to be absolutely precise, then Labour will be in majority territory. If the swing were 5% to Mr. Blair, then Labour would have a majority of around 25. Now, the last polls of the campaign were indicating a swing to Labour of 12%, right up here. And that would be enough to give Mr. Blair a majority of 157. Now, let's restart the swingometer and see what our exit poll is forecasting. Back it goes, first of all, to 0, and then off it goes. Through the hung parliament territory, crashing through a swing of 2, 4, 6, 8%, still going up past 10% until we get to our exit poll prediction, which is 12.2%, and a majority for Mr. Blair of 159. And as you can see, that is slightly more than the campaign polls were predicting. But if the polls turn out to be right, then it certainly means that some famous faces are at serious risk of losing their seats tonight. Michael Forsyth, the Scottish Secretary, could be out in Stirling, and Edwina Currie could be out in Derbyshire South. Seb Coe could lose Falmouth and Camborne, and Foreign Secretary Malcolm Rifkind could lose his seat in Edinburgh Pentlands. Sir Marcus Fox, a leading figure among Conservative backbenchers, could be out in Shipley, and even Tony Newton, the leader of the House, could lose in Braintree. But whether Tony Newton, or indeed any of them, actually lose depends on whether that overall swing in the marginals is repeated in their own seat. If they have a strong personal vote, they might yet hang on. We'll just have to wait for those tantalising real results. Jonathan.
And we are still waiting for the first results. The feedback I'm getting from the earlier declarers suggests that the counting is running ahead of schedule, so we shouldn't have very long to wait before the first result. This is what's happening at Sunderland South, where they're trying to break all records. They're hoping to declare within the next 10 minutes or so. And a quick reminder to you, you're watching Election 97, ITV's election results programme, and that based on our Moray exit poll, we are predicting that Labour will win this election with a huge majority. Now, for the first time in any election, we've brought a group of voters right into the core of our programme. Throughout the night, we'll be finding out how they voted and why, and we'll be getting their reaction to the results as they come in. Our panel is drawn from veterans of this campaign, those voters who appeared in the ITV and STV 500 programmes. We also canvass their views, you'll remember, for News at 10 surveys. With them, just across the studio, is Sue Lawley.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Let me introduce you then to our panel of voters. You may actually recognise a few faces from our programmes during the last 3 weeks in Exeter, Coventry, Bury and Basildon. And, of course, on Monday when they put the three party leaders on the spot. Also with us, though, this evening are members of the STV 500 from Scotland. They're all by now, all of them seasoned political observers who've challenged leading politicians during the campaign. Just first of all, for a reminder of what that's involved, let's take a swift look behind the scenes at the ITV 500 programmes over the last few weeks. The ITV 500 come from all over the country, from all walks of life. They're the voice of the people, asking the questions you want answered. In live studio debates with leading politicians, they've tackled the big issues of this campaign: health, education, crime and the economy.
1, 0 on title. 37.
In the firing line, the men who want to run the country.
You say that England is booming. The feel-good factor, but for who?
Now, you've raised one of the most important issues in this campaign. I want to deal with it head on.
You've dodged everything. Real figure on the minimum wage.
It's not for me to sit here as a politician and pluck a figure out of the air.
If that's what you want to do, fine. Go on voting for it. That's what you'll get.
Really believe any of you.
Well, there you were, Evelyn Wake, 2.5 weeks ago, I think, saying you didn't believe a word any of them said. How did you vote in the end?
I voted Labour, and I still don't believe anything they say.
Well, why have you voted for them then?
Well, I had principles that I've stuck by all my life, and so I must vote Labour.
So you're traditional old Labour?
Definitely.
So what do you think of New Labour and Tony Blair?
Not an awful lot.
But you voted for him?
But I had to.
It could be that a lot of people have done that tonight, couldn't it?
think so, yes, and he should be very grateful that they have.
I'm sure he will be if the exit poll proves to be correct. Let me go to the other end of the age spectrum, as it were, to one of our first-time voters in the ITV 500, Ed Hamer. I think you were determined to get the Tories out whatever, weren't you?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, as on Monday's programme I said, I was swaying towards Liberal Democrats, and I still think Paddy Ashdown's a brilliant leader. But, yeah, the bottom line is I did want Tories out.
So?
And so I voted Labour. I did go for Labour.
So you're a tactical voter?
Yeah, I'm a tactical voter.
You've never known anything but a Tory government?
No.
How important is it then? Why was it so important for you to get
It was important because, I mean, since they've got in, I've gone through a lot. I've graduated, I've been through all the education, I've been unemployed, and it's just important to me that I vote for the Labour Party to get in.
Why? What do you think they're going to give you?
Hope. Hope more than anything. I'm just fed up with Conservatives.
Okay, okay. Let me move to a traditional Conservative voter, I think, Freddie Huns from Exeter, yes? So you're not going to be happy tonight, are you?
Well, I don't know. I have to wait and see whether I'm going to be happy or not, Sue. But quite honestly, I remember the desperately fantastic years of Labour in the old days. Strikes everywhere, industrial strikes, bus strikes, rail strikes, miners' strikes, dockers' strikes, 26% inflation, which decimated my savings.
But of course Tony Blair's promised that none of those things will happen this time, that this is new Labour, that was old Labour. You're not convinced?
I shall take some real convincing. I don't think he's strong enough. I think the Rottweilers will come out of the cupboard.
Do you?
I really think this. I wish him luck.
If the exit poll is correct, of course. You've still got your fingers crossed, I can see in your lap there.
Yes, I have.
OK, and here is Jean Kettle from Basildon. Now, you gave Kenneth Clarke a hard time, a good going over, actually, didn't you?
Well, he didn't answer my question, did he?
He didn't answer your question, and I'm going to have to stop you from answering mine there, because we're going back to Jonathan right away. Jonathan.
Sue, we will be back with you very soon to pick up on some of these results. Interestingly here, I mentioned it before, Michael Heseltine has said it doesn't look good, but it didn't look good at the last election this time. But that wasn't the kind of thing he was saying last time round, was it, Mike?
Well, I mean, Michael Heseltine, the eternal optimist of the Tory campaign, even, 2 days ago, was it? Still predicting a majority of 60 seats. I don't think for a moment he believed it, but his role in life has been to try and gee up the campaign all the time. They're hoping, I think, that a miracle is going to happen, but I fear it isn't.
Absolutely. David Butler, in our analyst area, you have watched elections way back. We are hearing that if this poll is right, Labour has never reached 400 seats as our exit poll predicts. Put this into perspective for us, David.
Well, this means a swing of 12%, which is just what happened in 1945, the first election I saw as an adult. But of course it's nothing to 1931, when I remember going my mother to vote at the age of 7, and in fact there was a 500-seat majority for the Conservatives. So there have been bigger things. Nonetheless, this is much the biggest thing that has happened since the war to any party in any election. It is a turnover of a monumental scale.
David, thank you very much. Let's go up to Sunderland now and have a look and see how they're doing. They must be getting pretty close. The counting is still clearly going on. This seat, incidentally, is a safe Labour seat. It's Chris Mullin's seat. He's been here since 1987. It was the first declarer, as we heard before, in 1992, but it's been safe Labour since 1964. Chris
They were
Mullin...
actually just pipped by Sunderland North last time, but I gather that this time it is definitely going to be Sunderland South. And you know, I've talked to candidates about this moment, and they say that for each one of them, it is still the most stomach-churningly awful time, and I think we've got something happening here.
We're about to hear what the result is. The returning officer is there. You can see the candidates going up. Chris Mullin there is the bald man standing nearest the returning officer, the campaigner.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I can have your attention, I shall now read the results of the election for the Sunderland South constituency. I hereby give notice that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows. John Anthony Lennox, Liberal Democrat, 4,606. Christopher John Mullin, the Labour Party candidate, 27,174. Timothy John Schofield, Conservative Party candidate, 7,536. Margaret Ann McQuillan Wilkinson, UK Independence Party, 609. And that Christopher John Mullin has been duly elected to serve as the member for the Sunderland South constituency.
So Sunderland South wins the race to be first, and Chris Mullin, no surprise, is back in. His majority just over 19,500 with 27,000 votes. The Conservatives on just over 7,500, Liberal Democrats 4,600, and the UK Independence Party down there on 609. The swing from Conservative to Labour, 10.5%, almost exactly. Here is the share of the vote. Labour, 68% share. Conservatives, just under 19. Liberal Democrats, 11.5, and the UK Independence Party from a standing start, 1.5. And here is the change in the share of the vote. This is the important figure to look at. Labour is up by 10.6, almost exactly the same. Conservatives down by 10.4. Votes going straight there from Conservative to Labour, the rest not doing very much. Well, Mike, that is very much in line with what we're getting.
This is, of course, the Tories' worst nightmare now. If that result were repeated all over the place, where we see people switching straight from the Tories to Labour, in a straight switch like that, that, of course, is what would cause a landslide. And it looks as though we have the first signs, perhaps there, of the collapse of the Tory vote.
And Chris Mullin, who's a very independent character, if our results are correct, the fact he's independent is not going to be a problem for anyone in his party.
Well, absolutely not, but I mean, Chris Mullin is one of those colourful characters in the House of Commons. He always speaks his mind, and if Mr Blair thinks he's going to go in there with a sort of absolutely solid block of yes-men behind him, Chris Mullin will be one of the first people to prove him wrong.
David Cowling in the analysts area, can you crunch the reality out of those numbers for us?
Well, first of all, it's a record in terms of the actual time it's taken for this seat to be declared, but certainly it's in line with the projection poll that we have. But the feature of the last election in hundreds and hundreds of seats was that Labour went up, the Lib Dems went down, and the Conservative vote was solid. Here we've seen what appears to be a direct transfer from Conservative to Labour.
David, thank you. And now we can go to Alistair to put this into swing perspective. Alistair.
Jonathan, here's the swingometer again, and let's look at what happened in Sunderland South, starting at the 0 position. The swing there, the change of opinion, smashed straight through 2 and 4%, which is the point at which Labour become the largest single party. And remember, this is not in a marginal seat, this is in a seat, Sunderland South, that Labour took for granted from the very beginning. The swing there went straight on up through 6, through 8, to just a little over 10%. Now, if that were repeated in the marginal seats, the majority would be a modest 135, but it is a safe seat for Labour. One other interesting point to note there is the turnout was only 58%. Jonathan.
Thanks, Alistair. And whatever is going on here, I can assure you, we will always go straight to the count whenever it's an important story to tell. But to ensure that we cover the election fully, ITN is working closely with the ITV regional newsrooms all over Britain, and they'll be giving you detailed results in your own area. We'll now go over to them for a brief update on their plans for what are going to be some very crucial hours in front of us.
Good evening, this is London Tonight. We'll be here throughout the night monitoring results in the Carlton area, but first a look at the main news headlines. The driver of a black cab has raped a 13-year-old girl. He's stocky and aged 32 to 40. He picked the girl up in the Strand, saying the streets weren't safe, and then raped her in his taxi. Rock star Rick Parfitt has had life-saving surgery. The status quo singer, who lives at Teddington in southwest London, had an emergency heart bypass after being admitted to hospital with chest pains. And an explosion has hit a sports manufacturer's warehouse at Thornton Heath in South London. No one was hurt, but the cause is being investigated. That's it. We'll be back at around 2:45 in the morning with a local look at the local election picture. And this is how the map of the seats looks now, a swathe of Conservative blue. But the exit polls suggest a massive change. We'll let you know. We have special election programmes at 9:30 and also 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. But for now, back to ITV's election coverage.
Welcome back to the ITV Election Studio. We've had one result already. When the next comes, we will be there. Just to remind you, you are watching ITV's Election 97 results programme, and we're predicting a Labour majority of 159. Although, as we keep saying, that forecast will be amended as the night progresses. Now, no one will follow tonight's action more intently than all those party workers who put so much into their campaign fights. So to see their reaction to the results, we've got senior ITN newscasters at all 3 party headquarters. Julia Somerville, very hot foot from ITN News Studio, well done, is at Labour's campaign headquarters at Millbank. John Suchet is at Conservative Central Office, and Jackie Ashley is at the Liberal Democrats Election Night Centre, which is actually in a restaurant just off Hyde Park Corner. Julia, first of all, what's the feeling there at Labour Party headquarters?
Well, they're maintaining the iron discipline that they've shown all the way through the campaign, and nobody is dancing round the rooms or anything like that at the moment. But I think that the atmosphere obviously is extremely excited, and I think that the result we've just had with the evidence of transferring votes straight from Conservative to Labour are just what they want to hear here. I'm actually standing in the press room, which I think you're well accustomed to seeing now throughout the long campaign. Upstairs above me is where the campaign has really been masterminded and where the professionals in the party are gathering over their screens and crunching their numbers to analyse just what all this means.
Julia, the story was during the campaign that Peter Mandelson and others kept all those teams drinking orange juice and eating lettuce leaves. Are there no sort of bottles of champagne hidden somewhere for a bit of natural, spontaneous delight to flow if they're in front?
Well, none that I've managed to detect so far, and believe me, I would look, but I just haven't had time. But you know that we are due later on to decamp across the river to the aptly named People's Palace, where there is going to be a party, and I'm sure that there'll be much celebration and evidence there.
And we'll meet up with you again there, if not
Indeed.
before. John Suchet in Conservative Central Office, I guess, I can see you're outside there in the street, I guess that inside the spirits are not all that high.
Well, exactly. If there are any champagne bottles here tonight, Jonathan, they're likely to remain firmly stoppered up. I was speaking to a senior official a few moments ago, though. I have to say that he says 159 to Labour. No, that does not accord with what they're hearing from their own polls conducted up and down the country. They know they've lost the election. They know they've lost it badly, but they do not believe our exit poll of a majority to Labour of 159.
You say they know it. I mean, people are actually openly saying to you there, we know it's gone.
Well, yes, they're not putting their names to their faces, but they are saying, look, we know it's gone. And what they are saying, interestingly enough, is that the campaign has been a success. One official said to me that we did very well not to slip back during the campaign. The problem was the 5 years that preceded the campaign. An MP, a Tory MP, accused of accepting cash stuffed in an envelope. All the sex scandals during the Back to Basics campaign. It's just been one scandal, one problem after another. Great campaign, he said. Pity about the 5 years that preceded it.
Thank you, John. Jackie Ashley at Liberal Democrat Party headquarters. I can actually see Emma Nicholson just behind you there. But what's the spirit like? I can see several senior colleagues in the Liberal Democrat Party. What's the spirit like there?
It's very buoyant here indeed, Jonathan. The champagne isn't flowing yet, but there's certainly plenty of wine and beer. They're very pleased indeed with what seems to be the results from the exit polls and with that first result from Sunderland, because what it does show is their share of the vote is holding up in just the same way as it was in the last election, but the Conservative vote is going down dramatically, and that for them is going to mean a big gain in seats. They're hoping for around the 45-seat figure. They say that's what their private polls are suggesting.
Which would be astonishing, of course.
It would. When I asked them what figure were they putting on that great breakthrough that Paddy Ashdown was predicting on the last day of the campaign, they said late 30s, early 40s. So, of course, if they did hit 45, that would be fantastic. They're saying it's the biggest breakthrough for a third party since the 1930s. So there's a very buoyant atmosphere here indeed.
Jackie, thank you very much. Now, of course, every declaration is important and every vote matters. But as we've been talking about, it's the results and votes in the marginal constituencies which are the most important and which matter even more than the others. For it's in the marginals that the election is actually won or lost. Let's hear from some of the ITN reporters covering the battle of the marginals.
Well, here in the Assembly Hall of the Barnstable School in Basildon, they're beginning now to count the votes of the constituency which in 1992 gave the first dramatic indication that the Conservatives would, after all, hold on to power. Now, they're not likely to be very early declarers this time because they've got county council votes to count as well. But it has to be said that Essex man and woman, who last time gave Mr Major such an unexpected and pleasant surprise, is likely this time to be adding to the broad grin on Mr Blair's face. It would only take a 2.2% swing for Labour to capture Basildon. This is called a weather vane seat. It shows the way that the political wind is blowing across the country. How is it blowing here? Well, Labour people I talk to say they are quietly confident. Nicholas Owen at the Basildon count for election 97.
Here at Wolverhampton South West, there's been a high turnout. And the question that everyone wants answered is whether the maverick Eurosceptic Tory MP Nick Budgeon is going to hold on to his seat. It's been Tory since it was created, and he's held it since 1974. At the last election, his majority was halved to just under 5,000. And he has, of course, had a very chequered parliamentary career. He lost the Tory whip for 5 months because of his position on Europe. If he does lose, it'll be Labour's Jenny Jones that takes the seat. She was selected from an all-female shortlist. I spoke to her agent a short while ago, and he said he was optimistic, but we'll have to wait until just after 12:30 to see if that's justified. This is Jennifer Nadel at the Wolverhampton South West count for election 97.
I'm in Calder Valley, which is in the heart of the Pennines, and it's one of 4 Labour seats that they've targeted in the key marginal areas here in Yorkshire. And I have to say, so far tonight, their camp is looking extremely confident, not to say happy. It's disappointing for Christine McCafferty. She's not actually here, she's the Labour Party candidate, to enjoy these early smell of success that they're receiving. but they are confident that they've got the 4% swing they need to overturn the Tory majority. Now, you wouldn't expect the Tory MP, Sir Donald Thompson, to concede, and indeed he hasn't. He has fought a good campaign here on local issues. So there could be a surprise, because there's a little bit of suspicion about Christine McCavity, who has come from the left wing of the party and was a product of the all-female shortlist. So it could go either way. We'll know at about 2 o'clock, but it is looking very good for Labour. This is Penny Marshall at the Calder Valley Count for election 97.
Now, there is one very prominent Tory politician defending an exceptionally marginal seat. The seat is Derbyshire South, and the politician is Edwina Currie, and she joins us now. Mrs. Currie, you knew all this was going to happen, didn't you? What's it been like for you in this seat of yours?
Yes, I'm very tempted to say this is Edwina Currie reporting for you from Derbyshire South, down at the coalface. Yes, we've done a lot of canvassing here. We've worked very hard in the area, and people do not lie to us on the doorsteps. They told us very honestly. I'm afraid a large number of erstwhile Conservative voters have simply switched to Labour. I don't think we'll be having a recount here, I'm afraid.
Now, what made you caused tremendous rage in the party hierarchy. What made you write that article and say publicly, we're done for?
How nice to put the record straight. I didn't write an article at all. In fact, when I was asked about the article, I didn't know what people were talking about, because I knew that I hadn't written an article. I had done.
You must have said it to someone. Come on, you're not wet behind the ears, Edwina.
Well, I'd had a whinge on the phone to a journalist who I thought was a friend and who in 10 years has never ever broken a confidence. But on this occasion, he not only broke the confidence, he wrote it up badly as an article under my name, and I was pretty annoyed about that.
Given your experience, does this exit poll that we've got make sense? A majority right up there. I mean, we now, because of the results coming in, we feed in a little bit of the first result. We've got, in fact, 2 results, because Airdrie and Shotts, which is a safe Labour seat, is in. These figures, 150, 160, 170, that kind of majority is not a surprise to you?
I think it'll be over 100. It depends how it pans out in the different constituencies. The national exit poll has suggested 29% for Conservatives, and I think probably here it might be slightly higher, perhaps 31, 33%, something like that. But there is no doubt that the vote was decided a long time ago. I'm not sure the campaign made a scrap of difference, except in this sense, that it's clear that going Eurosceptic did not help the Conservatives one jot. It did not bring in extra votes, and in fact I think it drove some more voters away.
Interesting thoughts. We'll pursue that in more detail with others later. But one very quick last question to you. Are you just out of politics now and into novels?
Oh, well, you have to see. I mean, my daughter's record comes out on May the 19th.
Oh, no, we're not promoting here, Edwina Currie. Thanks very much for joining.